Hi, this is part 3 of my review featuring Darklord. If you haven't seen the other parts of my review, please check out the link in the description below. It will take you to the playlist where you will find all of the parts of this review. In this part, we are going to take a look at other Darklords. I will also talk about some included fiction without spoiling things for you. As you have seen from the other Darklords, they are very flexible when it comes to the archetypes presented by the lieutenants. You can create any Darklord that you want. The different forces have different sorts of Darklords within the same category. And you could also modify things. So for example, if you think that a Darklord could fit a similar yet physically different sort of creature, you will only need to change the appearance, the aesthetic trappings of sorts. And there are some lieutenants, some archetypes that I think are well suited for a particular representation of a Darklord. So for example, in the case of the Dark Elf Matriarch and the Lord of the Hunt from the Fey Queen's army, I think those roles are suited for that particular representation, especially when it comes to their genders tied to those particular roles. I think they are good as they are, but nothing stops you from modifying them. And in the case of some other archetypes, like for example the Dark Prince, nothing is stopping you from creating a Dark Princess. So now let's get started with this group of Darklords. First we have the Elder Brain. You are the Elder Brain, master of psychic powers, transcendent of the flesh, Dark Lord of the Outer Realms domain. Your forces are composed of grey Cynites, shape-shifting Chaos Frogs, and the many-eyed Watchers of legendary arcane power, just to name a few. The Outer Realms domain relies heavily on its casting, both arcane and psionic, for buffs, debuffs, and direct damage, with a wide variety of both combat and support powers. So the main strength of this army is that you can buff your forces and debuff the enemies. So you always want that advantage in the battlefield. This is a very strategic sort of army. You want to prepare things before you enter the battlefield. And you have some powerful psychic effects that damage your enemies directly. However, your weakness also lies in that if they catch you without those buffs on, or if the enemy attacks you without giving you time to debuff that force to weaken them first, then you're going to be in trouble. And most of your forces are weak in physical combat. So you need to keep that in mind as you are trying to conquer the world with the Elder Brain. It is also important to note that you do have the capacity to dominate or control others through psychic powers, so you must take advantage of that whenever possible. Now let's talk about some of the features of this force. When it comes to the domain power, the buildings in your domain connect to one another via non-Euclidean architecture. Once you have a mill in a territory and at least one terraform ritual completed, that territory may be considered adjacent to any other territory in which you have built at least one building. So again, we have that theme of preparing things beforehand, of building up your forces, boosting them for when the right time comes. When it comes to the dragon that you can summon, you can call upon the Yawning Gnaw. When it comes to languages, you have Aklo, Common, and Glossolalia. When it comes to magic items, you have the Pattern of Force. And remember, some gaming elements will be discussed in other parts of this review. When it comes to the things that you can purchase with your mana, you have Subtle Spell, Toughness, Malleable Form, Scrying, and Alien Minds. Let's talk about some of these abilities. When it comes to Arcane Prowess, this dark domain is soaked with arcane power. Any creature with the spellcaster ability receives twice as many spell points. When it comes to Alien Minds, the minds of these dark domain's inhabitants are too alien to be affected by ordinary mental magics. All creatures of the domain become immune to fear, confusion, and psychic damage. And when it comes to Malleable Form, the creatures of the dark domain are physiologically unstable and mutate drastically and rapidly. All creatures of the dark domain must roll a d100 once and consult the result in a table every time they level, and this will give you mutations as you grow in power. For example, maybe the creature's pupils shrink to pinpricks and becomes less sensitive to light, so dim light counts as total darkness for them. Or maybe the creature develops a pounding headache that never abates, so they take damage to their intelligence. Or maybe the creature's appearance is radically altered, but their size and basic configuration of limbs stays the same. Maybe the creature's tongue fuses to the bottom of their mouth, making it impossible to speak. Or maybe the creature's teeth grow razor sharp. They gain a bite attack, dealing 1d6 of piercing damage. If the target of the attack is willing, grappled, and restrained, the attack additionally deals 2d6 of necrotic damage. So maybe you can paralyze someone in some way, perhaps using your powers or using some mechanical means to deal more damage. The creature gains half as much health as the necrotic damage dealt to the target, so it also works as a sort of vampirism or cannibalism. They now require a diet of blood and cannot benefit from short rests. Or maybe your skin sloughs off, creating hideous wounds, and you take a lot of damage, but it is possible to survive this. Or maybe the creature's muscles bulge outward. You obtain an enhancement bonus to your strength attribute, and your carrying capacity doubles. So as you can see, some of these mutations are good, some of them are bad, some of them are just plain weird. They don't have a direct mechanical effect, although through roleplay you may take advantage or even disadvantage from them, of course. Now, let's talk about the units that make up this army. And it feels slightly Lovecraftian. It's like a combination of aberrations from Dungeons and Dragons and mythos. So when it comes to the lieutenants, you have the Elder Brain. Elder Brains are massive and impossibly brilliant creatures, literally pure brains suspended in tanks. Allegedly created by the Starspawn to serve as the ultimate advisors and oracles, the Elder Brains' brilliance and psychic powers allow them to take over and become terrifying warlords of the Outer Realms. And that's basically it. You're a brain, a huge brain in a jar. So you could be thinking, how do you move about the adventures? How do you cross the battlefield or infiltrate different places? Well, you take control or possession of another creature, another body. And it is possible for you to jump from one body to the other, but this is not as easy as it sounds. The creature will have a chance to resist your possession attempt, so if you try to psychically take over another body, it is not guaranteed. And if you get killed while possessing another body, that is, if that body gets killed, the backlash is so strong that you will be incapacitated for this particular season. So you will probably end up losing that adventure that you are taking on. When it comes to your attributes, you have high intelligence and wisdom. You have good hit points. You cannot wield weapons and armor, of course, because you are moving or acting through another body. You need to use the weapons and armor of that particular host. And when it comes to skills, you have things such as history, investigation, medicine, perception. When it comes to your abilities, you have things such as Elder Brain, Command, Psi Missile, Telekinetic Hand, Psi Storm, Thought Harvest, Mass, Dominate. Let's talk about some of these abilities. When it comes to command, as a standard action, you can issue a magical command to one living creature within 30 feet of your location. The target must make a willpower saving throw, and if they fail, they must obey the command. When it comes to Psi Missile, you can shoot Psi Missiles equal to your proficiency bonus as a standard action. Psi Missiles have great range and perfect accuracy, so they are basically a psychic magic missile from Dungeons and Dragons. Then you have Telekinetic Hand. As a standard action, you can use your psionic powers to pick up and manipulate any object within a certain distance. When it comes to Thought Eater, as a full round action, you may devour the thoughts of a willing or restrained creature you are adjacent to. If the creature is unwilling, they make a saving throw, and if they succeed, nothing happens. But if they fail, you can devour 1d4 points each of their intelligence, wisdom, and charisma score, and you heal the same amount of hit points. You can even devour specific knowledge of facts or memories to consume, removing them from the target and gaining them for yourself. Creatures whose intelligence, wisdom, or charisma score hit 0 become brain dead. And then you have Psi Storm. You can cause a psionic storm to tear through the minds of all creatures within a certain distance. The storm deals 8d6 of psychic damage. The affected targets can still make a saving throw to take half damage, but the damage is still quite massive. Next we have another lieutenant to serve as the Dark Lord, the Watcher Nonus. Though legends exist of the Watcher Ultima, a 13-eyed creature of immeasurable arcane power, the most powerful Watchers seemingly left in existence today are the Watchers Nonus, and even these have become very rare. Allegedly, The Watcher's Ultima were wiped out in a terrible civil war in the Watcher Empire, in which not even one Watcher survived without reincarnation. Huge and possessed of mighty magics, Watchers Nonus frequently become warlords of the Astral Sea. These are basically a combination of Beholder with Squid. Now, the interesting thing about these floating creatures is that if they are killed, they may immediately reincarnate as a Watcher Septima. With the same stats, however, you may have only a maximum of 6 eye powers. We will talk about those in a few moments. When it comes to your attributes, you have high intelligence, constitution, and decent dexterity. You also have decent hit points. You cannot wield weapons or use armor, however. When it comes to your skills, you have things such as perception, medicine, arcana, nature. When it comes to your abilities, you have things such as the Watcher Nonus, Charm Eye, Laser Eye, Telekinetic Eye, Destructive Eye, Mental Eye, Disintegration Eye. So like I said, it reminds you of the Beholders in Dungeons & Dragons. Let's talk about some of these powers. When it comes to Charm Eye, as a bonus action, you may gaze into the eyes of any creature you can see and which can see you within 30 feet. The target creature must make a saving throw. If you are actively attacking them or their friends, they gain an advantage on the save. But if they fail, they are charmed by you and consider you a friend. When it comes to Destructive Eye, it could be a Fireball Eye or a Lightning Eye, dealing magical damage of those appropriate elemental names. When it comes to Arcane Might, all of your magic abilities have a bonus to their attack roll or to save related checks. And when it comes to Disintegration Eye, of course, you may end up completely disintegrating a creature. These are very interesting Dark Lord lieutenants, because in the case of the Elder Brain, you rely a lot on indirect effects and the abilities of the body that you are controlling or possessing, and the Watcher Nonus feels a bit more direct in its attacks. But because you cannot jump from one body to the other, even though you have that reincarnation ability, you feel slightly more vulnerable, just slightly in my opinion. Now let's talk about the other units. First we have the Elites category, the Chaos Frog. Chaos Frogs live in pockets of pure chaos energy throughout the Astral Sea, places where causality breaks down and madness reigns. Some of them leave these pockets to serve as emissaries of their metaphysical anarchy in the material world. You also have things such as the Psi Knights. The Greys are legendary throughout the Astral Sea for their Psi Knights, mighty warriors of great psionic power. The order, which established their blend of swordsmanship, telekinesis, telepathy, and personal power enhancement, has long since fractured into many different sects and factions, many of which have been given into the darkness and now serve the terrible aberrant warlords of the outer realms in their schemes for transplanar domination. Then we have the Star Spawn, brain-eating horrors from deep in the Astral Sea. The Star Spawn are powerful psionics. Legend has it that they used psionic alchemy to breed the Greys into powerful psychics in their own right, though whether to use them as servants or scions depends on who is telling the story. Undoubtedly, the Star Spawn have all the same psychic powers of the Greys, and more. Now let's talk about the troops. We have the Grey Acolytes. Grey Acolytes are in training to be Psi Knights, and have focused their training on the psionic powers of telekinesis and telepathy, manipulating the physical and mental world alike with the power of their mind. Then we have the Watcher Quintus. One step away from final death, the Watcher Quintus has been slain and reincarnated down to just 5 eyes. They are tiny and adorable, but often desperate and cowardly. Then we have Father, the Grey Father. Though the Greys are most strongly associated with the image of the Psi Knight, the majority of Greys are simple peasants with only minor telepathic powers. You're one of those. Good luck! Now, as you can see, this force feels a lot like a hybrid of Dungeons & Dragons aberrations, specifically Beholders, with the Grey aliens, but they also feel a lot like the Githyanki and Githzerai, you know, those astral creatures in Dungeons & Dragons. So this is a very cool force. If you like any of those monsters, you have a great advantage when it comes to your psychic attacks, buffs, and debuffs, but you are quite vulnerable when it comes to direct physical confrontation. So make sure that you buff your forces, you weaken your enemy's forces before the fight, and that you perhaps dominate or control some of those individuals. You could even handle missions or adventures through stealth and diplomacy because of those mental powers. Next, we have the Fallen Seraphim. You are the Fallen Seraphim, once an angel of the upper planes, now commander of the fallen angels and risen demons, Dark Lord of the Heavens domain. Your forces are composed of angelic and demonic followers, from the burning radiance of the Ophanimous Gaze to the demonic fury of the Ainz. Your army excels at breakneck, fast, airborne attacks. You are highly agile. You are superb at alpha strikes. You must eliminate your opponent immediately because this is tied to the weakness of your force. You have a very difficult time handling counterattacks because although your forces hit hard and fast, you have limited healing capabilities and your armor is not that good. You have decent protection, but you are far from being the sturdiest army. And when it comes to your healing potential, your demonic followers cannot benefit from such healing effects. So you need to eliminate the enemy as quickly as possible, otherwise the counterattack could deal devastating damage to your forces. However, it's also important to consider that you emit this demonic/angelic radiance. It's so powerful, so glorious, that many enemies will feel intimidated by your presence. There is a bit of potential of winning different adventures through social manipulation through this intimidating radiance. Let's talk about some of the features of the army. Your domain power is that your cities and fortresses fly above the landscape, reaching back up towards the heavens that cast you down. Your flying fortresses are nearly unassailable. Whenever your armies must roll to survive battle in your own territory, you may re-roll 1 die per season. Whenever invaders attempt to destroy one of your buildings, whether a specific territory improvement or one chosen at random, that building may roll to survive as though it were an army instead of being destroyed automatically. Instead of summoning a dragon, you can summon a Baylor. When it comes to your languages, you could speak Celestial, Common, or Infernal. When it comes to magic items, you have the Pattern of Radiance. Some of the abilities that you can purchase with your mana include Expertise, Greater Smite, Strategy, and an ability called both Holy and Profane. Let's talk about some of these abilities. Both Holy and Profane. All angels in the Dark Domain may count as demons and all demons as angels for purposes of what abilities they can and cannot be targeted by. All creatures in the Dark Domain are immune to radiant damage and to being charmed or frightened. You also have Celerity. All creatures in your Dark Domain move faster, they cover more ground, especially when they are flying, of course. Now, when it comes to Greater Smite, creatures of the Dark Domain can employ different effects as their smiting attacks. So maybe you use Banishing Smite. If the target is not native to the plane you are currently on, they must make a willpower save. If they fail, they are banished back to their home plane. Or maybe you use Branding Smite. The smite deals fire damage. The target takes disadvantage on all stealth checks and cannot benefit from invisibility, as the brand left behind by the blow continues to glow. The brand lasts for 10 minutes. Or maybe you inflict a thunderous smite. The smite deals thunder damage. The target must make a fortitude save or be pushed back 10 feet and knocked prone. Or maybe yours is a wrathful smite. The smite deals psychic damage. The target must make a save or it will be frightened of you. And these are just some of the effects concerning your Greater Smite, and there are other abilities as well, of course. Now let's talk about the units, starting with the lieutenants. We have the Ainz Warlord. Though she caused the Seraphim to fall, the Ainz Warlord has no loyalty to the lower planes, for just as he fell, so too did she rise. She stands in defiance of the lower planes, seeking conquest only for the glory of her own ambition and that of her beloved fallen angel. She has high dexterity, good strength, and decent intelligence. You have good hit points as well. You can wield weapons in the finesse, heavy, and basic category. Your armor is medium, and when it comes to your skills, you have things such as athletics, animal handling, medicine, arcana, deception. When it comes to some of your abilities, you have Demon, Dual Wielder, Swift Attack, Two-Weapon Fighting, Whirlwind, Social Expertise, Unholy Bloodlust, fell blows, to name a few. And as a demon you are immune to fire damage, resistant to acid damage, and vulnerable to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from silver weapons. You also have dark vision, you can communicate telepathically with other demons, among other things. Let's talk a bit about some of these abilities. You have winged, that is, you have a fly speed equal to your movement speed. You also have 2-weapon fighting. When attacking with a weapon in your offhand, you may add your ability bonus to the damage. You have evasion, you are a slippery bastard. Whenever you make a reflex save for half damage and succeed, you take no damage, and when you fail the save, you still only take half damage. You also have whirlwind. When making an attack action, you may make an attack against every creature within your threatened squares, making a single attack roll against all of them. Perhaps you have Unholy Bloodlust. Whenever you kill a creature and absorb their soul, you gain temporary hit points equal to double their proficiency bonus. Next we have the Fallen Seraphim. Once one of the mightiest angels of the upper planes, the Fallen Seraphim quite literally fell in love with the Ainz Warlord and has descended from that extraplanar peak to the heavens just above the mortal earth to be with her, bringing with him many fallen angels. Now they stand in defiance of the angelic order they once served. When it comes to your attributes, you have high intelligence, good charisma, and decent strength. You have good hit points, you can use any weapons, you can wear heavy armor, and when it comes to your skills, you have perception, survival, nature, insight. As an angel, you are immune to lightning damage, resistant to fire damage, and vulnerable to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from bone weapons, so it's somewhat similar to the Ainz Warlord. You also have dark vision, you can communicate telepathically with other angels, you have advantage on all charm, persuasion, and intimidation checks against creatures with a lower proficiency bonus than you, but who are not fae, demons, or other angels. When it comes to some of your abilities, you have Angel, Aerial Combatant, Fighting Styles, Improved Critical, Angelic Orders, Greater Inspiration, and Unmatched Attack. Let's talk about some of these abilities. When you have Fighting Styles, you know a number of different fighting maneuvers and techniques, making use of different weapons, such as Great Weapon Fighting, Polearm Master, Shield Master, Armor Master. When it comes to Angelic Orders, you can spend an inspiration die to give an order that allows a friendly creature within a certain distance, who can hear you, to make a special reaction, such as Strike Them Down. The creature makes a full attack action as a reaction, or onwards, the creature may move up to their speed towards an enemy and make an attack action as a reaction, or maybe regroup. The creature may disengage as a bonus action on their next turn. You also have Unmatched Attack. You may make a third additional attack when taking an attack action for a total of 4, or perhaps you can employ a Dragoon Charge. As an action, you may leap from your current position to an enemy below you and attack them as you descend, dealing massive amounts of damage. Now let's talk about the units in the army, starting with the elite category. You have Ainz. When the Seraphim fell, it was in love with the demonic Ainz, and when he and his angels descended, so too did her Ainz followers descend to meet them. The Ainz of the heavens are every bit as agile and deadly as those of the lower planes. There are also the Nephilim, the half-angel children of the Fallen Seraphim. The Nephilim are the trusted lieutenants of the heavens domain, issuing orders and inspiring the other angels with their courage and bravery. Born after the fall of the Seraphim, they have no regret or shame for their position between the earth and the upper planes, and their pure devotion to their hybrid state gives the fallen angels renewed hope and vigor. You also have the Ophanim. Capable of firing deadly beams of radiant power, the Ophanim represent some of the fiercest raw killing power of the angels. Though fallen from the upper planes, the Seraphim's Ophanim are not damned to the lower either, but rather exist between, and they retain the radiant power of their celestial antecedents. Now let's talk about the troops. You have the Cavalier. Speed and mobility are cornerstones of the heavens domain, and while many of the Fallen Seraphim's followers cannot follow him into the sky to defy the upper planes, their ground-bound mounts at least allow them to race into battle below. You also have Archers. The Fallen Seraphim's banner has rallied the formerly faithful of all sort, including many yeomen trained with a bow to serve as the backbone of the Heaven's Domain's ranged attack. You also have the Hound Archons. Hound Archons are the vanguard of the heavens, and many of the Fallen Seraphim's loyal warriors fell with him and continue to serve as shock troops in the mortal world. Now when it comes to fodder, you have Peasant Fodder. When people think of the followers of the Fallen Seraphim, they think of fallen angels, demonic allies, or at least crusaders gone rogue. Most of the followers, though, are just regular peasants who are either fed up with the Radiant Council for one reason or another, or else were just born into the rebellion. That's you, not glamorous, not famous, not, frankly, very competent, but certainly numerous, at least. So as you can see, the lieutenants of the Fallen Seraphim's forces are quite flexible. The Ainz warlord feels a bit more jack of all trades, perhaps with more potential when it comes to social situations, but still, you possess some very powerful offensive effects, while the Fallen Seraphim is a bit more completely focused on attacks. That stops short from being a glass cannon thanks to medium or decent protection. You still carry out those lightning-fast flying attacks. But the force as a whole, although quite impressive and intimidating, and with lots of potential for dealing immediate damage, they are still vulnerable to counterattacks as mentioned earlier, so you definitely want to identify the weak spots on the enemy's forces and attack those sections quickly, making sure that the enemy cannot strike back, or at the very least that you cripple the enemy enough so that their counterattack is quite weak. Next we have the Hive Queen. You are the Hive Queen, nerve center of the swarm, devourer of kingdoms, dark lord of the Hive domain. Your forces are composed of swarms and swarms of bugs, from lurkers to unstoppable juggernauts. Unlike other dark domains, your minions will not compete for your favor, but instead cooperate you socially to achieve party-wide goals, the success of which grant all of them identical amounts of mana. Because everyone always gets the same amount, this means both that there is no need for backstabbing and that there is no penalty for death. A swarm is of absolute loyalty. However impressive that may be, you do have some weaknesses. Because most of your forces are basically overgrown bugs, they cannot wield forged weapons, most of them. Most of the objects, items and relics will not be of use to them. However, they do have some natural or rather unnatural weapons, and they are super specialists. A single type of unit is the best at what it does. But this means that if someone or something throws a wrench into your plans, you will have to adapt immediately. You are not very good at changing tactics. You need to stick to a particular strategy, and because you have super specialized forces, they are not very good at handling tasks outside of their area of expertise. So stealthy killers within your forces must sneak around. The juggernauts must crush the enemy and take them head on. If they are doing something else, there's usually something really wrong with the battle plan. Let's talk about some of the features of this army. When it comes to your domain power, while most Dark Lords conquer and oppress the masses, the Hive Queen kills them all to make room for more bugs. Instead of courthouses, the Hive Queen builds hives, which represents the territory's entire population having been killed or driven off. Every territory in the Hive Queen's domain that does not contain a hive is always in revolt, as the remaining survivors attempt to stave off the swarm. Territories experiencing an uprising may be controlled by stationing an army there as normal, but the uprising never ends until a hive is built. The Hive Queen cannot build blacksmiths, however her armies do not need to be armed, and are instead ready to fight as soon as they are levied. When it comes to dragons, you can summon an infested dragon. You pick any color for your dragon, and the dragon additionally has the eusocial ability. You have no particular languages outside of your hive communication. When it comes to magic items, you have the Pattern of Ruin. When it comes to the abilities that you can purchase using your mana, you have Elemental Evolution, Natural Magic, Poison Tail, Psychic Flexibility, Acid Immunity, and Endless Swarm. These are just a few of the abilities. Let's talk about some of them. Acid Immunity. All creatures of the Dark Domain are immune to acid damage. Elemental Evolution. When this power is first unlocked, or when you first spawn for minions who spawn after this power is unlocked, all minions of the Dark Domain may pick an elemental affinity. All abilities that deal acid damage instead deal damage matching the elemental type of the chosen affinity. You also have Endless Swarm. The domain produces new bugs at such prodigious speed that the loss of old ones is hardly noticed. Any minion whose body is consumed by the swarm does not count as having died for purposes of minion replacement penalties. You also have Poison Tail. The tail attacks of lurkers, warriors, and the Hive Queen now inflict additional poison damage and the initiated condition unless the creature makes a saving throw. There's also Infested Allies, and this one is quite thematic. You may select one class of troop or elite tier from another Dark Domain, not necessarily one being used by another Dark Lord on the council, and that class is added to your domain as an infested creature. They gain the Eusocial ability at level 1, but are otherwise identical to how they were depicted in their original domain, including their prerequisites, tier, proficiencies, etc. Now let's talk about the units of the Hive Queen. You only have one lieutenant, the Hive Queen herself. Every hive must have a queen. Without one, the hive is doomed. Luckily for the Hive domain, the Hive Queen is a powerful blend of the Lurker's aggression, the Juggernaut's carapace, and the Handmaiden's pheromones. Powerful, durable, and capable of buffing the bugs around her. When it comes to your attributes, you have nothing special. You do have a lot of hit points. You cannot wield weapons, you cannot wear armor. When it comes to your skills, you have things such as Insight, Acrobatics, Survival, Investigation. When it comes to some of your abilities, you have Hive Queen, Eusocial, Light Carapace, Infest, Heavy Carapace, Psychic Infestation, Aggressive Pheromones, to name a few. Now, as a Hive Queen, you are of large size. You move and climb at good speed. And you also have additional hit points. You have 2 scythe attacks that deal 1d10 plus strength damage, multiplying your critical damage by 3. You also have a bite attack, dealing 1d8 plus strength damage. You also have a tail attack that also deals a lot of damage. You can also lob a spine from your tail up to a certain distance. You have Tremor Sense. You cannot wear armor, but you actually have secondary arms, and you can grasp weapons with those appendages, so you are really a force to be reckoned with. One of the deadliest Dark Lords in medium to close range combat. Now let's talk about some of the abilities. You have Eusocial. You have 30 feet of telepathy to all other creatures of your domain with the Eusocial ability. You have no secret objective. Instead, you and every other Eusocial creature in the Dark Domain gain 1 point of mana for each of the following objectives that you complete. Biomatter. Biomatter must be added to the Hive's reserves as often as possible for the good of the colony. If each Eusocial creature in the Dark Domain consumes at least as many creatures as their proficiency bonus before the end of the season, every Eusocial creature gains 1 mana point. Also, if you infest at least one creature from the target light realm you are attacking this season, every Eusocial creature gains an additional mana point. And drones serve a vital role in nurturing the young and constructing new hive structures and must be protected. For the good of the colony, if a drone who spawned at or before the beginning of the season is retired at the end of the season, every Eusocial creature gains 1 mana point per level of the drone. And there are many other ways in which you can take advantage of Eusocial to gain additional mana points. You also have Telepathic Link. You can form a telepathic link with any creature within range of your swarm telepathy. You can use this telepathic link to communicate regardless of whether or not you share a language with the target creature. You also have Adrenal Glands. When you attack with your scythes, you may make an additional scythe attack as part of the same action. You also have Infest. As a full round action, you may infest a creature you are currently grappling. The target must make a saving throw. If they succeed, nothing happens. If they fail, they become infested. They gain the Eusocial trait and are directly under your control for as long as they remain within swarm telepathy range. If they leave your swarm telepathy range while remaining within swarm telepathy range of another creature of the Dark Domain with the Infest ability, that creature may take control of them. If they are ever out of swarm telepathy range of any infestors, they revert to normal. You may infest any number of creatures. So as you can see, you only have a single lieutenant, but this lieutenant is may well be the most powerful Dark Lord in individual or personal combat because of all of those abilities, and there are many more. Now let's talk about some other forces, starting with the elite category. You have the Handmaiden. Handmaidens, also called Censors, are psychic synapse bugs, expanding the range of the Queen's eusocial telepathy and linking the Hive together. They can provide buffs and healing to other bugs via their pheromones. You also have the Juggernauts. They are the heavy armor of the Hive, practically invulnerable between its large size and incredibly thick carapace. Though they lack the sheer number of attacks enjoyed by the Lurker and have no ranged capability at all, their massive sides will tear through most Light Realm troops like tissue paper, making them as difficult to ignore as they are to confront. There are also the Lurkers. They are stealthy and capable of absolutely devastating amounts of damage. Lurkers are relatively fragile compared to tankier warriors such as Sweepers or especially Juggernauts, but make up for it with incredible attack power. A Lurker leaping from the darkness can often be the last thing an otherwise unscathed adventurer sees. Now let's talk about some troops. You have the Flyers. They are airborne expendable cannon fodder, invaluable against ranged attackers for their ability to close distance regardless of walls, chasms, or other intervening obstacles that can prevent patrollers from closing in with their sights. You also have the Infestor. Personally tiny and borderline helpless, Infestors, as the name suggests, infest other creatures, seizing control of their body and forcing their trapped minds to watch helplessly as their flesh serves the Hive. Infestors are crucial for both information gathering and for acquiring abilities necessary to the Hive's survival that are uncommon or entirely absent from the Hive's natural members. Particularly developed infestors can even pass their infested hosts off as normal members of whatever society they originated from. So they're kind of like the face huggers or the crabs in the Half-Life video game. There are also patrollers. They are fast, agile little monsters used as expendable cannon fodder by the Hive. They are scouts in the sense that they wander out to where they can be pin-cushioned by arrows, so the rest of the Hive knows where the archers are hiding. When it comes to the fodder, you have the drones. Drones are vital for gathering resources and caring for the young. Unlike the useless fodder from most other Dark Realms, drones are defended by the Hive at large as amongst the most valuable members despite their frailty in combat. So as you can see, this is the sort of Dark Lord army for fans of aliens, Tyranids, Zergs, the monsters in Half-Life. All of those types of insect infestation type of armies are represented by this force. However, it's important to remember that your force is composed of ultra specialists. You must use each particular laborer for a specific task with a sort of utilitarian mindset. If you deviate from that, your one-track mind forces are going to be in trouble. Now let's talk about the included fiction in this section of the book, Summer's End. This is a very interesting glimpse into the setting of Dark Lord. You see a more clear, more direct interaction between the forces of the good guys and the forces of the Dark Lord. In the other fragments of fiction that I reviewed in part 2, there were some exchanges, but they were rather brief and or brutal. Here you have a bit more drama. There is more meat to the entire dialogue or lack of dialogue between the two opposing forces. You also get a taste of the sort of dread that a land that is in danger of being destroyed by the Dark Lord and her forces experiences before the attack. Some may even feel too overconfident. That is tied to a potential defeat of the Dark Lord. If you're looking for a way to rationalize or integrate the defeat of a Dark Lord during an RPG session, that is, maybe you failed during an adventure, your Dark Lord was defeated, in this particular fiction, you have an example of how the Dark Lord could make a comeback. And overall, I think you have one of those calm before the storm moments throughout the entire story. Not to mention a fairly obvious, but still quite appropriate plot twist at the end. Then we have the Ice Queen. You are the Ice Queen, ruler of the Frost Giants, undisputed Queen of Winter, Dark Lord of the Tundra Domain. Your forces are composed of Viking Raiders, Ice Myrmidons, Frost Giant Warriors. You reshape ice into walls, gates, and even entire castles with a thought. As ruler of the Tundra domain, your specialty is impenetrable defense, creating fortifications and funneling enemies into axe range of your mighty Frost Giant minions. So the greatest strength of this army is that you have a lot of health, exceptional armor, and heavy hitters to boot. You also have some sorcerous effects to leech the warmth and life out of your enemies. Your fortifications are also incredibly strong. However, this also is tied to your weakness. Because you are so strong, you're basically a walking anvil. The enemies usually outmaneuver you or outpace you. So you need to find a way to draw them close to you, to trick them, to ambush them. What good is it that your forces are so strong and so sturdy when the enemy can pick you apart from afar? So you really need to outmaneuver your opponent. You are not going to outpace your enemies. You're going to find a way to make them come to you at the right place and the right time. So anything that you can do to manipulate the ice and the environment around you, the frigid weather that only you can produce, cornering your enemy into open combat and trying to get your enemy to smash itself against your fortifications, that is what you are looking for in order to be successful with this army. You must advance slowly and steadily towards your enemy. Now let's talk about some of the features of this force. When it comes to domain power, once per season you can construct a free fortification as a Lord action by shaping the snow and ice into a frozen fractal castle. This requires no activation, and not even a meal. When it comes to the dragons that you can call upon, you can summon the White Dragon. When it comes to languages, you have Common and Giant. When it comes to magic items, you have the Water Pattern. When it comes to the abilities that you can purchase with mana, you have Altars of Ice, Toughness, Heart of Ice, Mighty Glacier, Altars of Winter. Let's talk about some of these abilities. You have the Altars. As Altars of Ice, this power allows the Dark Lord and their minions to build an altar to elemental ice, plunging temperatures within 30 feet radius to sub-zero levels. All creatures within the radius who are neither native to the Tundra domain nor immune to cold damage must make a fortitude save at the start of each of their turns. If they fail that save, they will slowly and constantly become exhausted. As you grow stronger and obtain the Altars of Winter, this effect will extend. You will be able to cover more areas with your frigid sorcery. You will literally suffocate your enemies in snow, wind, and ice. They will be unable to plant and gather crops. Getting food will be quite impossible, and they will slowly but surely die. Then we have the Heart of Ice. Creatures of the Tundra domain become immune to cold damage, being charmed or dominated, or being frightened. You also have Mighty Glacier. All creatures in the Dark Domain may choose to imbue themselves with the harshness of ice itself, gaining a bonus to natural damage resistance, plus 1 additional damage resistance for each feat of movement speed they sacrifice. Creatures from the Dark Domain may choose to take more damage resistance in exchange for decreasing their movement at any time, but they cannot shed the damage resistance to regain their movement speed until the end of the season. So you really want to corner your enemies, so that you can slowly advance towards them, and because of your great damage resistance, they won't be able to stop you. Now let's talk about the units of this frigid army, starting with the lieutenants. First we have the Frost Giant Jarl. The Frost Giant Jarl is the greatest warrior of their already mighty clan, the most invulnerable of an already extremely durable army, and whose mighty frost-bitten axe can cleave through all but the mightiest of defenses in return. You have high intelligence, high constitution, and pretty good strength. You have a lot of hit points, you can wield basic and heavy weapons, you can wear heavy armor. Your skills include animal handling, athletics, persuasion, perception, just to name a few. When it comes to the abilities that you can obtain, you have Frost Giant, Cleave, Great Weapon Fighting, Greater Regeneration, Superior Critical, Unmatched Attack. These are just some of the abilities. And as a Frost Giant, you are immune to cold damage and vulnerable to fire damage. Your Frigid Hive grants you a natural damage resistance of 5. You are also huge in size, giving you 25 feet of movement speed. Now let's talk about some of the abilities. You have Cleave, Whenever you kill a creature with an attack, you may make an immediate reaction attack against another creature within range. If you still have additional attacks left in your attack action, you may use them after the reaction attack. You also have Armor Master. When wearing heavy armor, you have bonus damage resistance equal to your proficiency bonus. You have Great Weapon Fighting. When attacking in melee with a two-handed weapon, you may reroll any damage dice that resulted in 1 or 2. You must keep the rerolled result, however. You also have Greater Regeneration. Your regeneration heals you for 10 hit points at the start of each of your turns. And you also have Fell Blows. The titanic blows of your deadly weapons completely ignore all damage resistance. How about that? Then we have the Ice Queen. The Ice Queen is the greatest spellcaster of the entire Tundra domain, specializing in the battlefield control spells of the Ice Rites, and capable of turning enemy creatures into ice entirely. You have high intelligence, high constitution, and pretty good strength. You have good hit points but not as good as the Jarl. You can wield basic weapons, you cannot wear armor. When it comes to skills, you have Arcana, Nature, Intimidation, Investigation, to name a few. When it comes to the abilities that you can possess, you have Frost Giant, Spellcaster, Ray of Frost, Wall of Ice, Imperious Presence, Flesh to Ice. Let's talk about some of these abilities. You have Ray of Frost. You can shoot a beam of frigid energy at a creature within a certain distance. If it hits, it deals 1d8 of cold damage and reduces the creature's speed by 10 feet until the start of your next turn, so this is ideal for this slow but powerful army. You also have Icy Shell. As a standard action, a creature you touch is covered in an icy shell, which moves and articulates with them. This gives the creature 6 points of natural damage resistance, which lasts until you are killed or dismiss the spell. The target creature must be unarmored, and cannot wear armor while affected by the spell. You also have Slippery. As a standard action, you can cover a 20-foot radius in ice. Anyone who starts their turn on the ice or who enters the ice for the first time on their turn must make a reflex save. If they fail, they slip and fall prone on the ice. And interestingly enough, creatures who can ice glide never slip on the ice and can use the ice to ice glide, of course. You also have Cone of Cold. You can shoot out a blast of freezing ice in a 30-foot cone. All creatures within the cone take a lot of cold damage. The targets need to make a couple of saves to take half damage and to avoid getting their speed reduced. You may use this powerful ability only once per season, however, so make sure it counts. You also have Imperious Presence. All creatures within 30 feet of you must succeed on a willpower save whenever they attempt to lie to you. If they fail, they are unable to lie, although they may instead choose to say nothing at all rather than speak the truth. You do not know if a creature has made the save or not. And you have many other things such as Ice Storm, dealing a lot of damage within a certain area. You also have Flesh to Ice, turning a creature to pure ice. This is a very powerful spellcaster. So if we take a look at these two lieutenants, you can see that the Jarl is perfect to lead the charge. However, the Ice Queen is perfect to stay behind and cast those damaging spells and cause the enemy to move slowly, so that your forces manage to catch up to the enemy and destroy them because of their damage resistance and their powerful blows. Now let's talk about some of the other forces in this army. You have the elite category, the Frost Giant Ice Rites. The Ice Rites of the Frost Giant clans are the masters of battlefield control and cold damage, dividing enemy armies apart and then ripping them to pieces. You also have the Frost Giant Warrior. Towering over the battlefield, the Frost Giant Warrior is incredibly difficult to kill and quite deadly in melee, yet also very slow. You also have the Snowscaper. Snowscapers are masters of support magic, granting creatures the health, power, and resilience needed to survive the terrible winters of the Tundra domain. And of course, we have the Viking Berserker. The champions of the Vikings. Berserkers have a terrible strength born from bloodlust. Now we have some troops, such as the Ice Golem, elemental ice animated by the ritual power of the Snowscapers and Ice Rites. Ice Golems are the foundation of the Ice Queen's tactical doctrine. Slow but durable, they are inevitable death. You also have the Ice Witches. The most basic adepts of the ice magic of the Ice Queen, the Ice Witches have the power in both support and battlefield control. We also have Viking Raiders. the mainstay of the Viking forces who serve the Ice Queen. Viking raiders are lightly armored, fast, especially for the Tundra domain, and aggressive warriors. When it comes to the fodder, you have Viking fodder. When people think of Vikings, they think of powerful and terrifying warriors crossing the seas in search of plunder. They do not usually think of you, a guy who was brought along mostly to help man the oars along the way, and who may as well join in the raiding since you're already here, I guess. I think this is going to be a very fun army to choose. However, you need to use those sorcerous effects and your faster units to rout the enemy to get the enemy forces closer to your more powerful units such as the Frost Giants, the Berserkers, to crush them. Otherwise, you are never going to reach them. The enemy will always be within arrow range, but not within axe range. Then we have another piece of fiction, which is called So You've Died and Been Conscripted into an Undead Army. This is a great piece of fiction. It inserts some humor into the setting. It also gives you some tips, I guess, or inspiration on how to roleplay as the Dark Lords and their forces. The Dark Lords could have different personalities, even if certain archetypes and stereotypes are conjured when you think of a particular Dark Lord and his or her army. Here you can see a very humorous take on a somewhat gloomy subject. And this concludes this part of the review. As you can see, very interesting forces. When it comes to the Elder Brain, you have those buffs and debuffs. You are frail, physically speaking, but if you prepare the battlefield beforehand, you are quite devastating, especially because of your mind control abilities. When it comes to the Fallen Seraphim's forces, I think it lends itself to a more aggressive, do-or-die, daredevil sort of playstyle. You are almost a glass cannon. You do have some strength to resist the counterattacks, but you generally want to eliminate the enemy as quickly as possible within the first attack or at most the second wave. When it comes to the Hive Queen, it's a super specialist sort of army. You need to work in clockwork motion. As long as you assign those units that are stealthy to assassinations, as long as you use the bulkier units to serve as shields or even as swords and axes for your forces, everything is going to turn out fine. But if you start to use those facehugger type of creatures to attack your enemies up front, then your forces will surely be eliminated. And when it comes to the Ice Queen forces, I would actually consider this army a beginner-friendly army because you are so durable, so sturdy. It is possible for you to make some mistakes, although if you want to be effective in the long run, you definitely need to become a master of slowing down the enemy and maneuvering the enemy forces towards your anvil and hammer sort of strategy. Well, thanks for watching this part of the review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know, and thank you so much to those that have been supporting the channel by sending drive-thru RPG certificates. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you, and see you later.